saying of unattractive people. And certainly, I mean, a lot of people who can pray to him.
There are. I mean, I was reading about him. He got
he's
some
up
disease.
on my wall.
He got some disease, so they built him a little cell next to the church so he could be given communion through like a little slot in the wall, and he just stayed basically sequestered for the last 40 years of his life.
That's not true, is it?
I'm reading it right here. St. Drogo stayed in his cell
God.
for the next 40 years, having no contact with anyone except to receive his simple sustenance of barley, water, and the Eucharist.
Jeez.
Basically bread, water, and then the bread of life.
Yeah, what? I mean, honestly. I mean, everybody was just so mean in the Middle Ages.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we are breaking down and celebrating the Gene Wilder film Young Frankenstein, one monster soliloquy at a time. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
And I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us for the first time, and we are so happy to have been able to work it into his schedule, we have Gerry Porter with the Indiana Jones Minute. Gerry, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
I know
it's a lot of fun.
We tried to get you a couple of times earlier, and then you ended up having a gig. You're a drummer. We'll chat about that for a second, but we just couldn't connect. And I was like, I'm going to give it one last ditch effort. We got Tom on. We were able to get Pete on. I'm like, we got to get the intern on. Come on.
Well, I'm very glad that it worked out, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Well, and the funny part about all this, and Walt, I had no idea, because I just kind of assumed with a movie like this, and these guys from the Indiana Jones Minute, they talk about so many of the movies you and I know growing up. I think it's almost like this brotherhood of people who grew up in the Spielbergian era of the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and even now in the new millennia. Gerry had never seen Young Frankenstein until agreeing to be on this show.
That is hard to believe.
It is true. It is true. And that is hard to believe. Although, don't you guys there's always a few movies out there that you just haven't seen. You should have. For instance, like my sister has not seen The Godfather.
What?
And I have no idea why. Yeah. Professor Gerry Porter has never seen The Godfather, and I just outed her in real life. So I think everybody has a few of those movies, and Young Frankenstein was one for me.
I guess that's the way it works with sometimes. There's just that movie that for whatever reason, it either passes you by, you didn't have that group of friends, and then you keep meaning to get around to it, but just something else always takes you in a different direction.
It's usually there's like a slumber party, but you had the flu, and so you missed, for instance, another one was Alien. Like I didn't see Alien till like 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Oh, I would have loved... Okay, see, this is going to be great. We've got this minute with this monster monologue. We're going to spend like the entire thing talking about everything but...
all the movies we haven't seen.
Well, I just now started listening to the Alien Minute from the guys that did, Alien and then Aliens, and I'm loving it. I love in my mind reliving moment by moment because I know that movie inside and out. And I saw it when I was a lot younger, so it made like that indelible impression, like a lot of these movies that we gravitate to, that we saw maybe between the ages of 9 and 14. Sometimes they make such an impression, we can't imagine them ever being thought of as, bad movies. So what did you think, though, as an adult seeing Alien?
I thought it was terrific. It was one of those, it's horror, it's science fiction. It's great. They take the movie seriously, and I love that. That's a bit of a thing for me, as you guys know, especially like with the Indiana Jones franchise. I like when they take the movies seriously, even in comedic parts or more loose scenes. It was dark and scary, and it had famous iconic scenes of the alien coming out of the belly and all that stuff. But that it was tense filled, and some of that is just almost what doesn't happen, or just long swaths of silence, and you're just like on the edge of your seat. And that's what it was like. I loved Alien. I thought it was terrific.
The coolest thing about doing these podcasts and then getting involved and finding them is they live as long as they're out there. You know, you can stumble across them at any point. And so I went out to the Alien Minute page and I basically, I'm starting to do like I did with you guys as I'm slowly discovering things or listening to things, I'll chime in. And I even said, I'm like, I know this was a couple of years back, but, you know, one of the episodes they were asking, well, what was it like your first time seeing it? And I honestly can't really remember. For some reason, I'm not sure if it was on VHS, if it was on a cable at a friend's house, but what I remember distinctly 3 years ago now, my oldest was getting ready to go to college. My next oldest was getting ready to be a senior in high school. And they wanted to do this thing all summer long, the 100 best horror movies according to like AFI. They downloaded a list and they just every day going to watch at least 1 or 2 horror movies. Well, some of them were really bad and old, but I didn't sit through them. But when they got to Alien, I decided I was going to sit in and watch it with them. And for the first 30 minutes or so, almost 40 minutes, they started getting sort of fidgety and they were just like, this is kind of boring. And I'm like, oh crap, am I losing them? And I realized what was awesome about it. It's the slow boil. It doesn't hit you over the head right away. It's slowly. By the time it gets intense, you're so invested, you haven't realized the water's been slowly getting hotter and hotter. You're like the frog in the boiling water. And they just on the edge of their seats at the end of that movie.
Oh, absolutely. And you, again, we were talking a little bit, I think, about the before we started recording here, could you get away with that type of movie today?
I don't know. I don't think
would everybody need a lot more action on the front end there to keep everybody invested? I was asking that question about Young Frankenstein. Could you make that type of movie today? Because I mean, that's upon first watch of it, that's what stuck out. It's like, wow, this is. I remember when movies were like this.
That's so funny because I think we had this conversation with a handful of guests, but I know it came up specifically with Tom Taylor from the Indiana Jones Minute, where I said, isn't it nice to have a film that will let you watch people on screen for 40 seconds straight without an insert, a cut to, it just lets it play out and you can sit back and just watch the performance. And yeah. We were talking and Tom said, you keep hearing people complaining about these hypercuts and nonstop action, but the studios apparently are too scared to kind of go back to this style of filmmaking. And yet every time we see a movie like this, we're like, why don't they make movies like this anymore?
Well, you're right. I mean, you use the word performance, and that's what struck me about this movie. I mean, it's really, it's the lines are funny, a bunch of them are, but it's like, no, the performance is what makes it so terrific. Just the interaction, the reactions, and just sort of the interplay, or what I say, it's sort of the communion of what's happening between the people on screen and watching that allowing it to unfold for, as you said, 40 seconds without interrupting.
Well, and I don't know that actors are even trained that way anymore. There are some that that are really, really good and can carry a scene for a long period of time. But honestly, I just don't see a whole lot of actors today who can carry scenes that long.
It makes sense to, have all those inserts and action sequences during or hypercuts during an action sequence, but when you're watching people perform, and Gerry, we used this term actually, I think a few minutes back, we said there's a difference between a movie and a film. And to me, this is a film. This is something it goes beyond just, it's just a movie. It's a film. It's something cinematic.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard that said before, but I do understand what you mean.
It's like the difference between a picture and art. Someone drew a picture. Yeah. My niece can draw a picture.
Yeah, I can draw pictures.
But there's something about, I don't know, Rembrandt. Well, we spent a lot of time circling around, and we're going to still talk maybe in generalities too about the movie because we get you for just 1 minute. I know you're a really busy guy. You've got a lot on your plate. Let's go ahead and set the table for our audience here who is joining us on this minute number 101 of, can you believe that, Walt? Number 101.
Hard to believe.
I'm sort of beside myself that plus we're this far into it, but we're this close to being done.
Yeah.
with
we're close close to the rap party.
We are. We're getting very, very close to that rap party, which is always fun.
Congratulations.
Oh,
I mean, that's no small feat.
No, not considering, a lot of people, I'm assuming, try this and then they fizzle and burn out and they may be never heard from again, but we are battling through. But let's remind the audience where we are. We finished up minute 100 last Friday, and in minute 100, the mob had burst into the secret lab, and Frankenstein's creature yells at Kemp, making him basically jump back, "I am the monster." And Kemp's like, yeah, I see that. So we start with this minute, "You are the monster," and we will end, it's Kemp saying, "You are the monster," and Kemp actually closes out the minute with, "This is, of course," and we don't get the rest of the line. But in between, we have actually a almost full-on soliloquy, almost a Shakespearean soliloquy from the monster. So, Gerry, let me go to you first, since, again, you just sort of caught up with the rest of us with Young Frankenstein. Your thoughts on this soliloquy, just in general, and we'll start piecing it apart. But what do you think about this speech?
It's kind of heavy. I mean, what's really sad is that the monster, he blames himself. He feels that he's a failure. He wanted to inspire love, but he couldn't overcome others' prejudices. And, so he turned to fear. And, it's a human moment, I guess. You could say ironically, because, he has a zipper on his neck.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, so, I mean... but it's something. I mean, he's vulnerable. He's completely caught, and there's a mob there, and yet he stops, and it's really the first time he says at the end of the minute, he's now able to express himself more eloquently or more appropriately, or just this has always been what he's wanted to say, but he goes, and you're like, God, I mean, that's really, really frustrating. If all you have is the letter M in your lexicon to
that makes it tough
with others, but what you want to do is inspire love.
How many letters in your alphabet?
Yeah.
I mean, before Groot, I guess this is I am Groot,
right? Yeah. He's really trapped there, and thanks to Frederick, he's blossoming, but the what he has to communicate is also sadness.
Right. I mean, you get a forlorn sense that he wanted to be something else, but nobody would. I shouldn't say nobody, because we saw in the movie the little girl gave him the benefit of the doubt, and so he was able to have time with her. And Harold, the blind man, was able, until he lit his thumb on fire, he was having a pretty decent conversation with this guy. But you're right, he never really had a chance to show that there was something within, and I guess that's kind of a neat message that we can pull from the movie, that we often tend to judge a book by its cover. It's an old cliche, but it's true.
Which is one of the notes I had written down. I mean, which is interesting because obviously it's a book.
Oh yeah, was it?
So, yeah, right. So I mean, when the monster goes out into the world, I mean, he's having a great time. It's not all thundering and lightning and raining every time. He's just in the backyard chilling, and the little girl says, "Sit down," and he's like, "Well, of course." And she
does sort of demand.
He's curious.
Yeah, she's a little demanding about it.
She does go,
she's a little demanding
sit
about
down.
it. We can forgive that.
Boo! Welcome to Flingenstein Airline.
But what's interesting about that is she does that because she's not viewing him on his body and this ugliness. So the one person who doesn't respond, with horror to him is this young innocent girl. So you think, okay, so between the ages of say 8 and I don't know, post-adolescence, from when you're a child to when you're an adult, we learn this fear of others, this that the monster is actually a monster. That's a learned behavior, right? Mm-hmm. The prejudices are all learned.
Well, actually, this is a perfect time because I know Gerry probably didn't have a chance to catch up on the scene you talked about with kids, especially special needs kids, or in this case, like Harold, who is technically he has a blindness.
Yeah.
They tend to be more accepting of others.
Right. Yeah, and they tend to, they tend to not see the flaws in other people. And they tend to be a lot more accepting of other people and their weaknesses or their frailties. And I know with our daughter, she really loves to help people who are in wheelchairs or have other things. And I think a lot of that is because of the issues that she deals with. And I don't know how much of that is true with the monster, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack to this. I told you that the last 15 minutes of the movie there's some problems for me.
Well, and we had some issues last week. Yeah,
yeah, but taking it apart minute by minute, I just kind of wonder, what is he talking about? Because
are we going to get to... Okay.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
You might be getting to what I usually do in these movies. They go, wait, what?
I'm playing the part of Alan right now.
Okay, put on the Alan hat.
He says as far back as I can remember. Well, the brain just got put in his body like a week ago.
Right.
So... like, how far back is he going? Or is he going back to memories when he was abnormal? Is he going back to, or are there embedded memories from the other owner of this body whose brain is now in the trash can in the laboratory? What exactly is he talking about? He has not been in existence as he is for more than just a few weeks.
Well, depending how long it took to train him, remember, we had that whole missing montage where he goes from, I'm going to show the world how much I love him and my name is Frankenstein, and the next thing you know, we're in the opera house. He didn't learn how to tap dance overnight.
Sure.
But at the most, a handful of months that he's been walking around.
Months.
And even then, if he's been trained, he's not walking around in public.
Right, I was going to say, he doesn't have the ability just to stroll through the city. He didn't grow up going to school.
No.
He hasn't been around long.
I think this is one of those instances where we catch the message, the universal human message.
Absolutely.
But the minute we put a little bit of the microscope, we're like, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. For example, if we were to go through this minute by minute, we might catch some of these things.
Yeah, when you do something dumb like that, you take a movie you love and you learn to hate it.
Right.
Or you should say hate
but
it.
here's what's interesting about that. What he says is, as long as I can remember.
It has. Maybe it could be that for as long as I remember. That's all he does remember.
He doesn't say ever since I was a child or for the last 30 years. What he says is for as long as I can remember. And so you go, okay, maybe he's only talking about, his experience post-operation.
It could. You know what? I didn't think of it that way.
That feels like a lifetime to him.
I guess when you think about it, it's sort of like I brought this up before, the whole idea of Blade Runner and the replicants. They didn't have memories, and so they crash on themselves after, that's why they built that failsafe.
Right.
Maybe that's him. All he knows is what he's known since he's been awake, and it's been mostly derision. And, even his creator telling him he's gotten a rotten brain and people laughing at him, throwing heads of lettuce at him when he's on stage doing his, Michael Flatley routine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which I now know who Michael
horrible.
Flatley is.
That really bummed me out.
It did.
That really bummed me. Yeah, when they throw on the heads of loved it, that really, really bummed me out. Because, everybody's sitting there and they're completely missing the point too. They're like, here's a guy he's tap dancing is a great routine, and there's the audience throwing, fixated on this one thing, throwing heads of lettuce at you.
Yeah, we talked about that when this all fell apart. We said to ourselves, we're like, well, wait a minute. He brought something back from the dead. And the fact that it got scared from a flashbulb, isn't that in and of itself an amazing autonomic response of the neurological system? And you guys are going, boo, he forgot to stick with his routine.
Ridiculous.
Well, it illuminates a pretty dark part of humanity. It's like, everybody's just throwing heads of lettuce at you. Despite of everything you just said right here. And so it shows you that it is really hard for the monster, to inspire love. His name is the monster.
Right.
He didn't even get a chance. I think for a while they call him the creature. Do they?
It goes back and forth between either creature or monster. Yeah. And at one point, which by the way, we can't help bringing in our friends from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they described him as a poor dead Hulk on the table. And he definitely done his version of Hulk smash through a few doorways. So, but beyond that, he's a Hulk. He's a gorilla. They've told him he's a 7.5 foot wide gorilla. Yeah. They've called him a monster, and they've called him a creature. They've never called him a man.
No.
And they've never
Right.
called him anything honorable.
They've never given him a name.
No. And what's his only redeemable quality, right, is his like enormous nunu.
It's Schwanstucker.
This is true.
Yeah. I mean that's what they don't say, but look at how he loves, or did you see how he tended the garden? I mean, there's nothing. There's
What
just
a great
nothing.
painter.
It's just that's what he's known for.
Well,
Yeah.
I will tell you, one of the things that I love about this soliloquy, and it is a moment where we've got this almost completely self-contained series of lines of Peter Boyle finally delivering dialogue. We've had to watch him basically 100 minutes of him basically doing and yar and yeah and whatever. He delivers a great monologue
He
to
really
this crowd.
does. He really does. It's
And
a great
it's
monologue.
sincere. It's well delivered. And even if we're poking a little hole in it for some fun, but in all honesty, it is that universal message to the audience. Look, I wanted to be better than I am.
If I could not inspire love, which was my deepest hope.
But because of you guys kept putting me in this bucket where I felt like the only recourse I had was to try to go the opposite direction of love. And that's to bring fright or scares or fear or, to terrorize.
I would instead cause fear.
And it makes an interesting social commentary underneath all of this comedy and monster movie magic of, hey, that still happens today.
It does, and I
Sure.
think that it's a reflection of all of us. So, and it's also in some ways kind of interesting because it's almost a shocking monologue. It's almost shockingly competent because we're used to the creature just grunting and growling, and then Peter Boyle does deliver such a great line, such a great speech, and it really, it pulls you in, and you realize what a great actor he really is.
Well, we do this from time to time with the script. Pete, I know you got Pete. God, I keep doing that because last time we had was Pete a couple weeks ago, and he's actually coming up next week.
Pete's the monster. I'm the creature.
The creature. Okay. So I know, Gerry, you guys do this with the Indiana Jones Minute. You'll get the script and kind of find some discrepancies or maybe things that were supposed to be one way, and it's interesting. You're going to be shocked about this, Walt and Gerry. This entire ending from the time that Inspector Kemp says, "Who are you?" back last minute, "Who are you to order these people about?" And he yells, "I am the monster." And we start off this minute with him saying, "You are the monster." Everything from this point forward was completely redone and on the set. Nothing matches the script for the most part. A few lines here or there. Let me give you an example. What we're supposed to start this minute with is Peter Boyle is supposed to sit up and say, quote, "I am a relative of the doctor's. I came to visit him a short while ago in hopes that he might be able to help me with a certain condition I've had since birth, but which, because of some very recent added pressures, has turned out to be more than I could deal with." The villagers, a relative? What is that? What did he say, a relative? The monster continues, "You see, it's only recently that the problem of my great..." What the hell? What was that? Sounded like
it's
somebody
the creature
opened
coming through the
secret
door.
to
So that
laboratory.
was the coffin opening.
It was it's Beaufort. He's like, "Shut up! This script sucks.
Not enough."
That's why we redid it." He goes on to say, "You see, it's only recently that the problem of my great size and somewhat unusual features of my head have become unbearable to me. Now it seemed that whenever people looked at me, they wanted to scream. I didn't seem to bother little children, but the older ones would cry or vomit. The men always wanted to beat me over the head instead of overlooking my outward appearance and respecting me for whatever good qualities I had to offer. You can imagine then, perhaps, how such bitterness led me to another kind of life. I decided that if I couldn't inspire love," and this is kind of very similar, "which I swear to you was always my deepest hope, I would instead cause fear." The villagers all shudder. But the monster is not yet done. He continues, "But our famous doctor here persuaded me to give him one last chance to redeem my soul. I found this man to be vain. I found him to be obsessed with a thirst for power and consumed with ambitions for personal glory. But even at the height of his quest, this ego-driven, brilliant, and half-crazed scientist always held an image of me as something beautiful. And then, when it would have been easy enough to stay out of danger, he used himself as a guinea pig in order to give me a calmer brain and a slightly more eloquent way of speaking. Yes, I am the monster, sometimes known as him, occasionally the creature, but they're one and the same. I am that tall, peculiarly attractive stranger with the winning smile. Would you all now get the hell out of here?"
Well, that's a little dry.
Okay.
That's a way of putting it.
Yeah.
Like sawdust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
Every time I read one of these scenes to you, Walt, you always look back and go, thank God they made the movie I watched on screen and not the one in the script.
Oh, no question. Well, and they took the important elements of all of that.
Yeah, they took like 7 lines and then rearranged and said, Peter, can you kind of just wing it?
Yeah, yes.
It's
And I'm glad they did.
I think what they did here, which I love, you can hear the themes running through this really overly done, too much dialogue, too much tell, not enough show. And I think they allowed it to be a much more of a performance when they rewrote it for Peter Boyle to deliver in the final product, because we don't need all of this. We don't need all this exposition. We get enough of a soliloquy that he tells the story that we need to hear, but not all this crap, basically.
Yeah, that's all nonsense and garbage in my mind. So,
Oh, and there is a joke. Remember, this has happened 5 times before.
Oh, yeah.
Inga then supposedly says, "Oh, fifth brain, you were wonderful, but now I'm worried about the doctor." And that's how we would have ended the minute, because we're supposed to be close to checking out the doctor. So that whole monologue that we're here watching on screen, really nothing close to what was going to be in the script. I guess they just decided at this point it didn't work. They just realized they had to kind of change it on the fly.
Well, I'm glad they did, because that would not have worked. And I don't know how much of that they shot, but that
I don't think if they shot it, I don't know where you would find it.
No, I've never seen it before. But that is a lot of monologue, and it's way too much monologue.
Yeah, way too much. Pete, let's God, I did it again. I'm going to write your name down in front of me. Jeez.
Here, let me help you. Jerry, you.
Can you, every time I point to you, just go, Jerry. Around second 15, we get Frau Blucher, who for some reason has sequestered herself inside the private library that had been the cell holding Frankenstein's creature. Jerry says, you're only with us for a minute. Very quickly, your kind of thoughts, having watched this movie, of Frau Blucher, and any of your moments that you like of Frau Blucher throughout the film.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, I actually really like that she plays the violin, and she's also smoking the cigars, right?
Oh, yeah. It was her cigar that led them to the laboratory.
And she has kind of a hee-haw entrance here, doesn't she?
Yeah, that's what it kind of
Like
reminds me of.
the little...
It's almost like Minnie Pearl. We just don't have the hat with a little tag on it.
Exactly. She kind of, I don't know. It would have been interesting if they had done more with her, possibly. I'm not sure what. But there's, she has the whole relationship with Frederick's
with Victor,
grandfather, right?
With Victor.
Yes, with Victor. Yes. So, what's that about? It seems like it's it's sort of verboten or something. I'm not sure, but it's like she's hiding something. But then maybe the horses know. I don't know.
Maybe that's why they're always whinnying.
I've always kind of felt like there was something going on with the horses that, where she had been cruel to them or something. There was something going on.
Well, and so in a way, the horses are just like the monster, because they just only have the one, that's all they have to speak. Maybe they're trying to send a message too, but they're limited in their communication skills.
One of the things that, and this is only, Walt, because I've done film, I've done a lot of theater, but I've done a lot of film as well. And it's one of those things that bothers me that sometimes we see, maybe it didn't bother you, and Jerry, I don't know if it would bother you, but when Frau Blucher looks through the door, her eye line goes to the left of the door, which would be nowhere close to where all the action is happening in the center of the room. To me, it bothers me, because in my head, I know the layout of the room now, because we spent so much time describing it. It's almost like Mel Brooks didn't know where she was supposed to look for this insert, and so they said, well, just kind of look in awe, as if you're kind of eavesdropping on this conversation. But it kind of bothers me that she's not looking more center of the room. She's looking off to the side of the room.
Yeah, and I actually would have rather had her in the room.
Oh, yeah, everybody. I think so, too.
I thought this was kind of a little bit of an awkward and weird shot of her, and almost overly expressive.
I wonder if it's one of those moments where they're in the editing room and they go, oh, you know what? We forgot to bring Frau Blucher in this scene. She really belongs here. So let's just go ahead and shoot an insert of her kind of staring through the people, or through the little trapdoor there.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Because it just feels weird. I mean, she reacts as if she's listening, but of course, that's just the actor. You can feed lines to her off screen, but it just doesn't feel right.
It's very weird. And we've talked about there are 2 or 3 other shots in the film that are just kind of awkward and odd.
Just kind of like the weird insert out of nowhere, or the weird freeze frame out of nowhere, and the fake zoom out of nowhere. It's just like, wait, what's that all about? When we get to, and Walt, this is for you, because we spent so much time chatting about some of these villagers and side characters. We do get an insert of 3 of the villagers at around second 22. Isn't that the guy in the middle in the back, the guy that you said was the president of the Screen Actors Guild?
I believe it is, yeah. I believe
that at the time that he was sort of getting a kind of a walk-on part as part of this, that he was the president of
president of
SAG.
the Screen Actors Guild, yeah. Isn't that odd?
So he's got the little button up on his coat, he's got his tie, got the little hat on. You've got the other guy that I think was delivering the angry town hall speech.
I think that is
during
him.
the angry town hall meeting, or the HOA meeting as I called it. And then who's this guy that looks like kind of Tim Curry's, I don't know, long-lost brother?
I don't know. I recognized him, and I couldn't figure out who he was from some of the descriptions.
Right.
But I've seen him on other stuff, and I just can't figure out who he is.
It's an interesting shot. First thing I thought was, is that Tim Curry? No, that can't be Tim Curry. He'd be too old.
Too old, yeah.
So,
well, I was kind of hoping that they would say the village people are.
The village people. Why?
What I'm noticing is every one of those people is wearing a hat.
Yeah, the whole village.
All of them, yeah. I mean, it's, must be blazing sun. I mean, every person in this entire room is wearing a hat except the monster and Inga.
Yeah, the owner of the hat store.
Even
guy
Igor has his head covered.
Right. Well, this goes back to, you made a comment about, hey, this was in 1974, but in 1974, the idea of guys wearing hats outdoors had kind of gone away. But in 1930-something, if we are going back in time to this era of the original Frankenstein, men wear hats. So it's that visual glue.
There are a couple of men without hats, but
there's one guy in the foreground. When we do another shot around minutes.
I feel like saying in 1938, like a lot of people played the clarinet too.
True.
I mean, in popular music. Or I mean, it's fascinating, these trends and how they change.
Well, I do think it's interesting that we do constantly get that reminder that even though it's technically a 1974 based film, everything about Transylvania is still back in some long lost time, as if time has forgotten this place of Transylvania. Yeah. Even though the train shows up, even though they've got cars, they're all old cars. It's an old train. It's track 29. Give me a shine. It's nothing. There's nothing modern here.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I think the most modern thing is the lab equipment.
They go. Igor takes them in a hay wagon or whatever. I mean,
here's your ride.
Not even like a bicycle or anything. And they cross through the forest. A very scary looking forest, actually. So it is one of those, the unknown. It's sort of in a medieval way,
Mm-hmm. And, again, we're always bouncing back and forth between comedy and monster picture, and they walk the line so well that initially the very first tagline was the scariest comedy of all time.
Which was also voted the most popular of the taglines.
On our listeners group.
Yeah.
This is, again, for me, when you do this, you slow things down. And it's depending on how large your screen is. Right around second number 53, Peter Boyle, as the monster, finishing up his monologue, looks off to the right. And if you look right at the corner of his eye line and just below where the stitches are, the staples in the side of his temple, you can see where the makeup is not quite blended leaves kind of a jarring, like almost a lightning bolt zigzag along the side of his cheek there. So you do catch that. You don't catch it when you're watching it with friends, when you're having the sleepover, when you got the pizzas out and you're just sitting back laughing. But watching a movie a minute at a time, you're like, they didn't blend the makeup.
Stuff like that, yeah.
So I don't know why I wrote that down. Like, oh, look, zigzag is the Harry Potter mark. It's just on Frankenstein's creature. But that's I think the last note that I had for at least this sequence, because it does end with Inspector Kemp, who is basically, after hearing this wonderful monologue, says,
This is, of course.
And we don't know what else he's going to say. So before we start to kind of close this out, we only get Gerry here for this 1 minute. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about some other things, but Gerry, you get the stage one more time here before we close it up. Anything about Young Frankenstein that you want to specifically mention, call out? You had a chance to see it for the first time. It's one of those movies that I think you have to sometimes watch multiple times because there's so much packed in it. But anything that you just want to throw out there about your first sort of foray into this world?
Well, I did have a question for you guys. If you can't inspire love, then what do you do?
Don't drink, don't smoke. What do you do? Don't drink, don't smoke. What do you do? Subtle innuendos follow. Must be something inside.
Don't drink, don't smoke.
I mean, it's interesting. I thought about it because he went straight to fear, right? And I don't know. I guess he just wanted to be noticed. He just wanted attention of any, really just acknowledgement. And at that point, it didn't matter what type of acknowledgement, just as long as he was seen.
Well,
I guess ironically, he didn't like the way he was seen originally or perceived, but he just wanted somebody. He just wanted somebody to recognize that he too was there.
Maybe this is one of those things where the anger that he may feel at not being able to love comes out in a way that causes fear. Because I've often thought of that there's a very fine line between love and anger. And you can take something that you want to be, and if it is always passing you by, it turns so easily from a passion of something you desire to angst and anger, and you become kind of the polar opposite. And so even though he says, I wanted to scare you or strike fear, I think it actually comes out of the sort of that when love doesn't happen, it turns to anger.
Right. And in a way, we're all handicapped as humans with those types of emotions and baggage and things that we have to deal with, and maybe we don't want to, but sometimes the grooves, the roads lead that way, even though they shouldn't.
No, I mean, I think
it's all our own vulnerabilities. So that and when Igor attacks the foxhole.
Yeah, one of the great scenes.
Part of the whole movie.
Yeah, we just had that not that long ago here as we're toward the end of the movie when Elizabeth shows up. And here's the thing, Gerry, if you get a chance to watch this again, we actually earlier in the podcast, and I am sticking with it, I think when Marty Feldman sat back and said, okay, what's my motivation, like every actor does, I think he's the family dog. He acts all the time like a dog. And of course, when another dog sees a dog, it's going to, make him, sometimes it's a dog fight.
Oh, wow. Here you go. I like that. You're right. He is. He is like that.
I mean, he's
Great.
always like Squirrel, like looking off. We're attracting his attention. If you go back to when they're digging up the body in the cemetery, he's not digging like a normal human. He's digging like a dog. He's like just arcing these big clouds of arcing dirt right over his head, landing right back where he started. I mean, he's a dog.
Beginning where he's first introduced, and Frederick is like, "Oh, I thought they said your name was Igor," and he's like, "Well, they were wrong, weren't they?"
Well, you were wrong then.
That's amazing. Yeah, he kind of bites.
He has, although up until, if you go back and watch it, up until the lab where he finally says, yes, master, for the very first time where he actually acknowledges you are the master, he does tend to give Dr. Frankenstein a bit of a hard time. Almost sort of like that tongue-in-cheek. I mean, he scares him with the row of heads when they're first discovering the lab, and he does his little tap dance with his chin inside the box, and... But
you're right, though. He is a little bit like
I think he likes
family dog there.
He likes to needle. He likes to needle Frederick, but I look at him as the family dog. I think Inga's the sweet lab assistant. He's the dad. I think Cloris Leachman's character of Frau Blucher is sort of like the housekeeper. She's like the Alice of this Brady Bunch. She knows everything that's going on in and around the house. And so, I think we see little bits and pieces of all of what we can relate to. That's just, they're wearing these really weird costumes in this particular world.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Walt.
Well, I did go back and watch a few of the scenes again, and you're right. It was much more enjoyable. Not that it wasn't the first time, but it was. You're right. You'd probably have to see the movie several times to really pick up on everything that's going on and how great it is. It's one of those movies that gets better.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, even though we found some flaws here and there, my appreciation actually for the film has gone up as a result of this podcast. Learning to see the little jokes, the fact that they'll they'll drop a line and they won't pick that joke or that line back up for like maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And then all of a sudden they circle back around like, oh, that's why that's a funny line, because now they're finally closing out the joke. And I love the layering of slapstick in one moment, but then the high humor in the next moment. And then it's back to telling a serious story. And then we're left with this monologue. We'll end as we started, a wonderful monologue that really is a testament to how we should all be living our lives, not as the creature, but as the creature himself even says, this is what I would want to be. I want to do, I want to love. I want to project love and be loved. And wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't the world be a better place? Walt, you got anything else that you want to add about this minute?
No, I think we covered this minute pretty well.
We did a pretty good job and covered a whole lot of ground outside of it. Gerry, what about anything else that you want to add before we start to wrap up?
No, I'm good. It's certainly enjoyable.
Well, a couple of things I want to give you a plug for first, and I hated that I got the date mixed up with my daughter's, it was an awards night for graduating high school, because I was going to come see you in Atlanta. For folks, if you don't know Gerry Porter, he is actually a drummer, and Gerry, why don't you tell people the band that right now you kind of go on tour with?
Sure. Well, I play with the guitarist Dick Dale. And we're going to be starting a tour August 3rd. And I think it starts in Denver. There's, maybe like 20 some dates that's going to be happening throughout. Well, basically, it winds up on the East Coast. So we play all sorts of different cities and throughout August. So, yeah, if anybody would like to come see Dick Dale play, I'd love to. I'll be out on the road, and you can go to dickdale.com and check out the tour dates, and come say hello.
And hopefully you'll get a chance to swing through Atlanta again at some point, because I will make a point of getting out there and seeing you, because I went out to check out a lot of the Dick Dale library, and I realized how many songs I knew and how many guitar riffs I recognized from films and other things, and I realized like, oh my God, this is like the grandfather of surf rock. I mean, this is the guy that came up with that sound.
Yeah, he does do his own thing. That's for sure. I mean, even today, you just hear it and you go, "Oh yeah, there it is. Oh yeah, I know exactly what that is."
I'll insert a little bit here, but if you guys know Pulp Fiction, again, that's a famous guitar lick from Dick Dale right there to go along with the Pulp Fiction theme that Quentin Tarantino used. Yep. So I love it. And Gerry, outside of being a musician, you actually have a podcast that has become world famous, and you guys are just wrapping up at the recording of this minute, Last Crusade. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Well, we do. My co-host Pete and Tom and I, we do the Indiana Jones Minute, which is we do what you guys are doing with Young Frankenstein, which of course is a ridiculous endeavor, going through a movie 1 minute at a time and discussing things, poring over it to a ridiculous degree, and we have a lot of fun with it. So it's Indiana Jones Minute.com, or there's a Facebook page called the Listeners Crusade, where people like you and all sorts of other people chime in with great and harebrained and awesome theories about the movie. And actually, that's my favorite part. My favorite part is just the interactions and meeting new people and hearing all sorts of the different takes on the Indiana Jones franchise. I love it.
Yeah, it is really, really
kind
cool.
of a stalker on your Facebook group. I don't
wait
really
on his
comment. Yes,
on his. Gerry, careful. You might want to lock your personal page down.
Well, not your personal page, on the Indiana Jones listeners group. And there are some really interesting conversations that go on there. I've commented once or twice, but
I love it. There's something
you do have some great listeners.
Well, Walt, as we close this out, how do people learn a little bit more about us?
Best way to learn about us is to go to our website, www.thewilderride.com. And from there, you can find our Facebook page, you can find our old episodes, you can find anything you want to know about us.
And definitely come on back tomorrow. We're actually going to be joined by Crystal Beth tomorrow. She'll be joining us at the very tail end of this. She'll be here as we begin minute number 102, which will be Inspector Kemp continuing where we left off mid-sentence, where he started off, or he ends, this is, of course, he'll start off with an entirely different situation. And it ends with Dr. Frankenstein saying, hello, Mrs. Frankenstein. Wait, what? There's a Mrs. Frankenstein? To figure out what happens tomorrow, you're going to have to be back here tomorrow on this, The Wilder Ride. All we need is love. Do, 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 do. All we need is love.
You have any drums you can tune in with?
That one, yeah.